Hello, Colorado. I'm Montana, Director of Marketing here at Maverick, and I have a very special guest for us today, the amazing Lizzy Butler, Director of Wine at Vine Connections, which, as you guys know, is our amazing South American portfolio. So we have beautiful Argentinian and Chilean wines from Lizzy, and she is one of my favorite people to talk wine and spend time in general with because you're the coolest. And we've had so many great memories together, but now we're not traveling, and that's what we like to do together. So we have to do it a little bit differently this time. And I've always really wanted to go on the South America trip with Vine Connections. It hasn't happened yet, maybe someday, but in the meanwhile, we thought we'd bring everybody else along that wants to go on this trip too and do it through wine, our favorite thing.
Montana, I'm so happy to see you. It's lovely. I love seeing all you're doing in your backyard always. So thank you for welcoming us to your home, and B, the Maverick world. You guys are the best. I miss you dearly. So this we'll have to do to bridge the gap between when I last saw you and when I can see you next. So I'm thrilled to be here, and there's no better time than right now. I think we've all been, being at home, we're all grateful to be safe and healthy, but I think being wine lovers, we always have this thirst for wanderlust and to travel and to understand these places where the wines come from. So we do this all the time, but especially in these last couple of months, I really have been traveling via wine. And having lived in South America and leading trips there every year, there truly is nothing that I've experienced as more life-changing than a road trip through the Andes on the Chilean side and on the Argentine side.
So that's I can only imagine. We've been exploring the Colorado mountains, and I just think about that place. So you're going to show me.
Yes. I lived in Colorado before South America, and it gives me goosebumps, honestly. Like the Rockies and the Andes have a very kindred soul, and so I love talking to people from Colorado with the wines because they can have more of a visualization of the feeling of what mountain wines really feel like. So for the setup today, for our road trip, we have 4 wines to taste together and 4 different regions to visit. So we're going to start in Chile, and we're going to visit 2 wineries and 2 regions. Then we're going to hop over the Andes and head to Mendoza in Argentina. And we have 2 different wines from the Mendoza region, 2 different winemakers, amazing female winemakers on the Argentine side we'll talk about today. So lots to cover. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock. I know, me too. Well, as you know, Montana, I mean, we're both very big wine nerds, and I think there's nothing better than learning about maps of wine regions. And if we're going to go on a road trip, then we got to have a map, right? So I would love to just give a really quick 101 of the map of Chilean wine and the map of Mendoza wine to give a little more visual of where we're going. So we're starting on the Chilean side. So basically, Chile and Argentina are the southern part of the continent of South America. It's the southern cone, if you will. It's like a triangle. And on the eastern side is Argentina. It's a much bigger area country. And then on the western coast, the long, skinny country of Chile is the west coast of the southern part of the continent. The natural barrier and border between Chile and Argentina are the Andes Mountains. So it's really significant when you look at the full map of South America, and especially these 2 countries. The Andes are the long, skinny spine that goes up and down the continent, and it's the longest and second highest mountain range in the world, which is incredibly significant. So, and when you look at the wine regions of Chile as well as Argentina, especially Argentina because it's wider, the majority of wine regions in Argentina are to the west of the country, which means they're right up against the mountains. That means everything really gravitates back to that mountain range. So everything from soil to climate to geology to history to culture and evolution all really ties back to that mountain range. So it's very much a heart and a soul of both the stories of Chile and Argentina, and especially the evolution of wine. So it's kind of crazy to me for anyone to learn about wines from Chile and Argentina and not understand the Andes Mountains. So that's where we kind of start always. And so if we go to the Chilean side, the length of Chile as a wine region is essentially the same width as the United States. So that is an incredibly long country. The average width, though, is about 120 miles. So that is crazy skinny. So, the dream of Californians, you can, ski in the day and surf at night or do the opposite. It's like almost too achievable in Chile. But it's a really useful imagery, right? So if you look at the country of Chile, it's a long, narrow Pacific coastal region wine area that has the Pacific to the west, a Central Valley in the middle, and mountains to the east. That is California, right? So, but Chile, think of that sort of context and orientation, but elongated and on steroids, right? So instead of the Sierras, you have the Andes, and instead of the Pacific of California, it's even colder to the south with the Humboldt Current coming up the side from Antarctica. So it's an incredible experience of nature and the extremities of nature when you go to Chile, especially. So the really centered in the middle third of the country. So the current map of Chilean wine appellations is about 1,200 miles going north to south. What's really cool about that is that distance is exactly the same distance as our west coast of the United States. So really, if you think of Chilean wine and our west coast, they overlap in distance delta. But now we're south of the equator in Chile. So essentially the winemaking regions of Chile are like our west coast flipped upside down and on steroids. Like,
but that helps so much. It helps to understand it a lot.
Totally. When that orientation is kind of made, that comparison, the light bulb kind of goes off, right? Yeah. So that gives a little bit of orientation. The amazing thing about representing the portfolio we have from Chile is that we represent the most appellation-based portfolio of Chilean wine in the US. So when we go down to Chile, we truly road trip almost the entire length of California because we represent so many different valleys going north to south. And each winery we represents their specific valley very much in the expression of varietal and style of wine. So there's never overlap between wineries because they're so specific to that specific valley. So it's an incredible experience. And essentially you're going from the edge of the driest desert in the world, which is the Atacama to the north, all the way down to the edge of the Lake District in Patagonia. Everything in between is some of the most beautiful landscape you'll ever see, and the wines speak to that. So that's kind of the Chile 101. As we hop over the Andes to Argentina, literally the flight you take is you get in the airport in your airplane in Santiago. You fly almost directly across parallel the Andes Mountains to Mendoza. The entire flight is about 45 minutes to an hour. It is over the Andes Mountains. It is like a sea of Andes mountain peaks below you when you look out the window. It's like, if you want any mountain porn videos in your life, like go take this trip and look out the window. You can see Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in the Andes, which is the second highest outside of the Himalayas at about 23,000 feet. It's unbelievable. But the coolest thing about living kind of the California Mediterranean climate in Chile, where you always kind of need a jacket at night, you get more moisture, you land in Mendoza, and if you literally cut the Andes in half like a cross section, you have the moisture coming off the ocean in the Chilean side, hitting the wall of the Andes. And what that creates on the other side of any mountain range is the rain shadow, something called a rain shadow. So when people hear Mendoza, they often learn that it's a desert. And that the reason why is because it's a rain shadow effect from the Andes, from the moisture from the Chilean side. So in contrast, Mendoza is first a drier area in general. It's like Colorado, over 300 days of summer, of sun per year. And you've got that beautiful blue sky. Literally the color of the Argentine flag, that celestial blue, is after that sky, that color sky, and that clarity. There's such little humidity that the clarity you see in Mendoza is amazing. What it also alludes to is a really important element of winemaking, which is irrigation. So you have irrigation in Chile, but you can also dry farm from the natural rainfall. That is not possible in Mendoza. So all of the irrigation for vineyards in Mendoza is fed by the snow melt off of the Andes Mountains.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's so cool. I mean, literally when we talk about mountain wines, it's not only elevation, which we'll discuss, but it's the life force of water coming off of the mountains. And it's not just for vineyards, it's for humans also. I mean, the life-giving force that the mountains are is literal. So you have that element, and then you also need to take into consideration that the base level elevation, like the city of Mendoza, is at about 2,500 feet. base elevation. So all the vineyards are essentially up from there. So it always makes me laugh. Californians are like, oh yeah, we have mountain fruit. And it's like, maybe 2,000 feet, maybe.
Right, because those are some of the highest vineyards in the world, right?
Exactly. So Mendoza, you're going to get anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 now plus feet. Salta is the area farther north of Mendoza in the desert of Argentina. That's where you're getting the 10,000 foot vineyard areas there, which are some of the highest in the world. So there are definitely wines that get high in the Mendoza side, and that creates an enormous effect on viticulture. So when you go up in elevation, you're getting different soil types, of course, with the Andes orientation, but then you're also getting closer to the sun. So the sun intensity and luminosity in the grapes really affects the expression of the wines based on where it's planted. And you're also getting different temperature variations. So the diurnal shift as you go higher up in elevation gets really dramatic. So although it's a desert with high sun, you're also getting cold temperatures. So it's such a unique area to ripen a vineyard in a place like Mendoza. So, I mean, overall, that's a general overview of both regions. But I would say in Mendoza, there's a lot of subregions. The main two I usually like to review is Luján de Cuyo versus the Uco Valley. Luján de Cuyo, a little more classic, traditional region near the city of Mendoza, a little bit farther east compared to the Uco Valley. It's farther south and farther west. As we're in Mendoza now, as you go west, you're actually going up in the Andes. So it's a generally higher elevation area, generally newer to the game of exploration for Argentine wine in the last 20 or so years, save for some older vines in the Uco Valley. So I think the name of the game of the future for Argentina is defining more of the regionality within Mendoza, not just considering it just one kind of chocolate and vanilla style of wine. There's a ton of nuance when you start to understand the terroir on a more microscopic level. It really makes me want to travel there with you, Montana. Like I'm getting all psyched up. I can't wait we're gonna do it one day, of course.
Someday when we can, we will.
Yes, exactly. And what I love too is that it's amazing when I do talk to customers, whether in person or virtually, there's such a wanderlust. And I think a lot of people go for adventure travel. They want to go to Patagonia, they want to hike, they want to kayak, they want to fly fish. All those things are still applicable. But I would say in the last 15 years, the food and wine element has definitely come more into play and intertwined with that. So there's been such an increase of interest of food and wine travel, gastronomic travel for Mendoza, for Chile. And I always say it's going to be the trip of your life. So I highly encourage everyone to get that on their bucket list.
Well, and I think you're like me, because the best trips are like, if you're a wine nerd, then, you know, you want to go see vineyards and visit wineries and see different types of things. But also I always want to like put in a little bit of the culture and the like, you know, the hiking, and in this case, like all the outdoor activities. So to be able to do both of those things in one day and like have it all, it's just like, it just sounds epic.
It's the dream. It's the dream. I mean, when people say they might not come back when they're down there, like I actually believe them. I've actually had people on some of my trips that don't return. I'm not even joking. That happened once. I was like, oh, I got to tone down the inspiration here.
A little less fun, Lizzy. A little less fun, please.
Yeah. So we're doing, I mean, I would love to take you through all the valleys and all the regions today, but at least for a toe dip, we're going to start in Chile, and we're going to taste 2 different vineyard areas, 2 different wineries, 2 different grape varietals. And it's really fun. They're 2 different, but very emblematic grapes of Chile. We have Sauvignon Blanc and we have Carmenere. And we could spend so much time just talking about just those 2 things. But we would start our road trip. So if we all were going to Chile, we'd fly from the US and land in the city of Santiago. It's the capital city of Chile, very centralized. And we would stay the night. We probably have too much fun in Santiago that night. But we would get up and persevere, and we'd all get in a van, and we'd drive directly west of the city to a region called the San Antonio region, and a sub-region of that is called the Leda Valley. Overall, I call this area the Sonoma coast of Chile for two main reasons. One, it's a very coastal region. Literally, you're up against the Pacific Ocean. Two, it's very renowned for cool climate varietals like Sauvignon Blanc, like Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. There's even some cool climate Syrah there, which is outstanding. So that helps people kind of visualize what the Leda Valley is like. A really important part of this story. So the wine is called Boya, and it's made by the Garces Silva family. And I always say that the most important thing to remember about Leda is that we wouldn't have a Leda Valley without the Garces Silva family, meaning they were the first to recognize the Leda area as a winemaking region. Otherwise, no one before had thought about it as a viable place to grow grapes because they thought it was too close to the ocean with too extreme of temperatures and climate to grow grapes. In comparison to that, the Garcia Silva family recognized it as maybe one of the most prime regions to grow cool climate varietals. So again, if you kind of took a cross-section map of Chile, you have the Andes Mountains to the east for sure, but there's actually a coastal mountain region very similar to California that's lower in elevation, kind of rolling hills. So therefore, it very much depends where you are in the orientation of those hills will really dictate how coastal your wine is, right? So, there's some areas of the Sonoma coast that's like 20 miles inland, and you're like, where's the ocean, The Leda Valley, in comparison, is literally on the slopes of the coastal mountain range that lead to the Pacific waves. So I always say these grapes have the best view in Chile because they're looking at the Pacific Ocean. So there's nothing in the way of the Pacific Ocean and the vines. So true coastal wines. So the name Boya means buoy. So it's alluding to that coastal orientation. So they first planted varietals like Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and that was in the late 90s. And today, the Leda Valley has grown to be one of the most sought after cool climate regions in all of Chile. So huge turning point on the history of Chilean wine. Yeah. I'm so grateful because I can't imagine, and Leda especially for me, I think has a very distinct taste of place. So when you dive your nose into a glass of Boya, it's two main things. First, you smell a lot of lime. It's like lime citrus bursting, and there's elements of passion fruit and a little bit of jalapeno. So for me, like, if you're gonna have fish tacos or chips and guacamole, like, there's no way you can't have this wine because it's like putting a lime over your taco. And yeah, it's the best. And then you sip it and it has a lot of those flavor components on your palate. But what I love about wines from Leda is that there's always a really salty finish to the wines.
Well, they're that close to the ocean. How could there not be, right?
It's exactly. And it's really cool. The winemaker, Diego, and his team are doing a lot of research on where exactly all of that salty influence is coming from. There's obviously the fog that rolls in the morning that has a lot of influence on, the salt crystals that dry in the grapes. There's salinity content in the soil. A lot of different kind of intake sources there. And you can note it in the white wines, you can note it in the red wines and the rosés. So I just love it because it makes you keep wanting to sip, which is often not a problem we have, but
and it's
it makes
like
it great
for your food.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So in your world, what does Boya Sauvignon Blanc mean to you, and as you've experienced it and tasting it?
Well, to me, it was the wine that really changed my opinion of Sauvignon Blanc potential of these types of varieties in Chile, because I had Chile to me has evolved so much just over my 10-year career, which isn't that long in the scheme of things. And the wines have become so fantastic producers like this are providing such elevated high quality wines. This Sauvignon Blanc has like so much richness to it, but also is just like so crushable. But it's really super complex. And if I'm going to show someone an example of Chilean Sauvignon Blanc and I want to make the right first impression, that's where you start. And sometimes it makes more sense just to talk about the fact that it's Sauvignon Blanc and it's really awesome, and then tell them about Chile after they love it. Because sometimes they're just like, they have an idea, like they don't know what to expect or it's unknown, but they know the grape variety. So if you start with something that they already love, you can blow their mind, and then they want to try the rosé, then they want to try Pinot Noir, and then we get them up to things like Pais and Carmenere. So it's a gateway wine.
The Chilean slippery slope, I think, is my favorite thing of the day. That is amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
I love it. I love it. I think you're so spot on. I think the positioning and storytelling is really impactful depending on how you kind of cue it up with someone, especially if you're talking to a buyer or a Sauvignon Blanc lover. I think that's really influential on people's perceptions. And that's honestly a lot of the wines that we have evoke that sort of experience with someone. It's a mind shifter. It's a game changer. It opens them up to an element they hadn't had access to before. So that is awesome. And again, everyone, especially in summer, get Boya Sauvignon Blanc stocked up in your fridge. Whenever you're putting seafood on the grill or making ceviche or again, having taco night, like, come on, it's a no-brainer.
Love it.
So that is the Leyte Valley stop. And again, that represents just one part of Chile, but the coastal influence of Chile, of course, is essentially the entire country. And it also speaks to how, yes, you get a lot of diversity going north and south, but you also get perhaps even more diversity going east and west in Chile, because in a very short distance, you're going from coastal climate to mid-valley and then the elevation of the Andes. So you kind of have to think of Chilean.
Like visiting this particular winery, what other like types of activities would we like throw in the mix? I like to hear that side of it too. Like, would be kayaking, or are we going like, what are we doing?
Oh my God. Like, how many minutes do I have? So honestly, this experience going to the Garza Silva winery, first of all, they're one of the most amazing, nice, hospitable families I've ever met. And so when you arrive, we walk up the hillside up to this overlook where you can see the Pacific Ocean, and you can see all the vineyard blocks planted. And we take out a map and you can see where everything's planted. It's almost like Simba from Pride Rock seeing all of the land that the light touches. Like, that's what it feels like. And then we crack open a bottle of Boya Rosé, because Boya also makes a rosé. And Sylvia lives close by to the winery, and she cooks everything when we're there. And I call her the best chef in Chile. She makes seaweed empanadas. Yes, seaweed empanadas. Seaweed is a huge part of cuisine and harvesting from the coast of Chile. So the pairing of the seaweed empanada and the Boya Rosé, truly, if I need to go to a happy place in my mind, that is the moment I go to.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then we go to the winery and we go to the patio, and then it's essentially a series of seafood, like what grows together goes together feast. So we'll crack crabs on the side of the patio and have fresh crab with the wines, which is such a beautiful natural pairing. We'll have a ceviche bar, which has either salmon or some whitefish from Chile. And then there's also abalone, so cooked abalone that's super tender, and you can dip it in different, homemade sauces, like a spicy sauce or a homemade mayonnaise. And then the pièce de résistance is that Matthias does the salt-crusted corvina, which is a big Chilean sea bass in the mud oven. And no, it's stupid. Like, I'm not making this up.
Stupid. I'm salivating.
I know. And there's an unveiling of the fish, and then you gather all your things and you make this enormous plate. And they also make Syrah, and there's lamb and sheep that roam the vineyard as a part of the holistic part, main management of the vineyard. And they do roasted leg of lamb in the mud oven as well. And that with the Syrah is just like, your mind is blowing up. It's the best pairing I think I've ever had. So then we're all, in bliss and in a food coma, and again, blissfully so, but we all get in the van and then we go to the coast. So we finish our day literally with the sun setting on the Pacific Ocean and putting our toes in the Pacific waves. And we've got bottles of Boya with us and the sun setting. It's really amazing. It's an amazing day. It's awesome.
And I'm sure there's a bunch of fishing too. I mean, they probably take people out on trips too, because you're bringing all that seafood. But like, if you want to go deep sea fishing or have like an excursion like that, it's something I'm sure people do as well.
Yep, absolutely. There's fishing elements. You can go harvest some oysters. I've been able to watch the seaweed fisherman community actually harvest the seaweed, which is a wild sort of ceremony, if you will, of like these huge staffs, and they go down the rocks and they cut the seaweed and it washes up to the shore, and they dry it and bundle it. It's really it's an art, really. And it's, if I can describe the Chilean coast, it's very like rugged and rustic and has this kind of spirit to it. And it is the godsend. If you're a seafood lover, go to Chile. Like, end of sentence. That you will have an amazing time experiencing all that the sea gives you there. So yeah, the Leda Day and the Garza Silva Day is usually one of people's favorites, especially. And again, if you're a surfer, oh my God, there's world-renowned places to surf in Chile, very much within that general region. So you can fulfill your surfer dreams also.
Oh, you could make anybody happy, because sometimes you bring someone with you and they're not as much of a wine freak, and you can be like, you can go do that.
Totally, absolutely. Everyone wins. Everyone.
You can convert them down there, it sounds like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's lots of conversions going on. Yep. Lots of dreams being made. It's great.
I love it.
So actually, this is very cool because we do this lineage that either we start in Leda and go to Colchagua, or start in Colchagua and go to Leda. So for the next wine, we're going from coastal Leda, Viña Garza Silva with Boya, and they also make a wine called Amina. Then we'll get in a van and we'll drive about 2 hours southeast. And so we're going to an area called the Colchagua Valley, which if I'm calling Leda Valley like the Sonoma coast of Chile, the Colchagua Valley is like the Napa of Chile. And that's for two other main reasons. One, the Colchagua Valley is one of the most renowned valleys in Chile for wine tourism. So it's a very well kind of mapped out region for people to visit wineries and drive around, kind of like a la Napa. It's just, they're not as close together as something like Silverado Trail or Napa. And then secondly, the Colchagua Valley overall is most renowned for its Bordeaux reds, just like Napa. So mainly though, it's very famous for its Carmenere. There's Cabernet planted as well as Merlot and Cabernet Franc, but Carmenere much a king of the Colchagua Valley. And honestly, the entire day we spend in Colchagua is with Viña Casa Silva. So that's the winery we're with. And the theme of the day, what I call the day as a title, is the Carmenere Crash Course. So if anyone has never learned about Carmenere, or has had these not so great experiences with grape of Carmenere and have some preconceived notions, their mind will be changed by the end of the day.
And we were talking about conversions, and I've heard you say Carmenere convert before, and I've seen it happen. It's magical.
You've seen it happen. It is a real thing, and it really happens. And
so
the Casa Silva winery is like this is the truth. So what's amazing about the Casa Silva family, they're a 6th generation winery. They're based in an area called San Fernando, is where the winery is. Very old winery, based back in the 1800s, is when the family originally coming from France came over to Chile, which many families did. And essentially what Casa Silva has been able to do, one, is kind of open up the terroir map of Colchagua. Initially, a lot of the vineyard areas was only in the Central Valley, and Casa Silva was the first to pioneer towards the coast of Colchagua and also towards the east of the Piedmont of the Andes. Really important element of the Carmenere story with Casa Silva and with Colchagua. So the vineyard area which they pioneered for Carmenere is called Los Lingues. And Los Lingues is now become an official DO in the map of Chile, because they proved that it is one of the most premier terroirs to make outstanding quality Cabernet in the country of Chile. So kind of there's always kind of like a mystifying element of the grape of Carmenere. I think essentially people know it from Chile, and because it's become a very kind of flagship grape from the country. But the reason is because it was rediscovered in Chile. So Carmenere is one of the original Bordeaux 6 red varietals that came over to the Americas from France in the 1800s. And essentially when the first vineyards were planted in Chile from the vines from Bordeaux, equally whites and reds, it was kind of all planted together, which sounds very organized, right? It's like, oh, here's my Bordeaux red vineyard and here's my Bordeaux white vineyard. So over time, as they started labeling the grape varietals, essentially they labeled Carmenere as if it was Merlot. Essentially, the grape cluster of Merlot and the leaf shape and size of Merlot is almost identical to Carmenere, so you can kind of give them some leeway there. But over time, winemakers started realizing that some of the Merlot vineyard areas had two different color leaves in fall time. So some rows were yellow, some rows were crimson red. Some of the rows of Merlot would ripen 2 to 4 weeks earlier than some of the other rows. So instead of Chileans thinking like, oh, we might have a different grape varietal growing here, they started calling the red rows of Merlot Chilean Merlot or late harvest Merlot, or Merlot. It's like, oh my gosh, guys, how many names can you think of before you start realizing it's not
so far off from what the Italians do with Sangiovese. So
right, exactly. And essentially the name, the Carmenere has a nickname, and it's called the Lost Grape of Bordeaux, because all of the original rootstock Carmenere came over to Chile before phylloxera hit France. So when France had to replant everything, winemakers did not replant Carmenere in Bordeaux, mainly because it is the last grape to harvest of all the reds. So with the climate of Bordeaux, 9 times out of 10, you're never getting a ripe Carmenere crop. So financially, it's like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. So we're not going to replant it. Little did they know that all of they were preserving what they had in the country of Chile across the world. But the Chileans thought they just had a bunch of Merlot. So very fascinating kind of evolution of this grape.
And this went on for a pretty long time.
Yeah, like it astonishes people when they hear the base of that story. And I'm like, what year do you think that Chileans realized they had Carmenere? And people are like, 1890, 1930. I'm like, yeah, it was 1994. And everyone's like, ooh, man. Like, even the Chilean winemakers got together and they're like, guys, we messed this up for a long time. Like, we're kind of embarrassed. What do we do about this? So do we tell everyone?
It's so cool too that since we were talking about France a little bit, like, is it still true that Chile's never had phylloxera?
Yes, it has never had an outbreak of phylloxera.
They not only had Carmenere, but other varieties that that's the only original rootstock in the world.
It's so true. I mean, man, we have so many tastings to do. I mean, we could just have a whole discussion about the old vines of Chile. All the original, I mean, Chile is home to the most original rootstock vine DNA left on the planet. So it has been this kind of lockbox of preservation that's kind of gone under the radar for centuries now. And now this generation is starting to really recognize the importance of vines and also making wines for export so people around the world can learn this story and taste these wines. So such a cool, I think this time right now for Chile is the most exciting it's ever been in its evolution for wine. And I think it's only going to get more exciting as these winemakers keep getting creative and more confident of telling their own story. So Casa Silva was really one of those wineries during the time of Carmenere's rediscovery to kind of stand up and be like, all right, let's own it. Let's own the story. Let's be grateful that Carmenere landed in a place, ironically, that's kind of its idyllic home, because Chile doesn't have a lot of harvest rain threat and it can have enough temperature to really mature Carmenere correctly and have it be balanced as well. So they're like, all right, we need to figure out where Carmenere is planted in Chile first. And then second, we need to understand where Carmenere grows best. Because we can't think that we can just make good Carmenere in the winery, because you can't really hide bad Carmenere in the bottle. It's essentially
it's not right. It's not going to taste good.
No, and you've had it, Montana. I've had it. We've all had Carmeneres that taste like chocolate.
It's one of the reasons why talking about the Boya Sauvignon Blanc opening people's eyes to good Chilean wine is because a lot of people had shitty Carmenere a couple years back and are like, I'm never drinking Chilean wine again. So it's so like Carmenere convert, but like they've just exited the country, and it's so fun to like show them how great it can be and is.
It's like, I wish I had a dime for every time I put either a Chilean bottle and especially a Casa Silva Carmenere bottle in front of someone who's literally looking in my eyes and saying, I don't like Carmenere. And I'm like, I hear you, but please humor me and try this bottle. And what they find in the glass, and again, this is kudos to Costa Silva's work in the vineyard and understanding where Carmenere grows best. It's kind of this alchemy of the right elevation and the right soil type that have a lot of drainage with alluvial and colluvial soil, versus Merlot needs more clay with more hydration, equally with the temperature that can really moderate the maturation of the grape, the sugar levels, the development of the pyrazines, which is that green pepper element that you get in any Bordeaux red. Once all of that is balanced, you can taste the bottle of Carmenere that has unbelievable aromatics, that has dark berry fruit, violet aromatics. You get a smokiness like a tobacco and roasted red bell pepper element. That all comes together to be the proper understanding of what the varietal Carmenere should taste like. So the coolest thing I think with Costa Silva Carmenere, now having it come into the US market, is that it's literally recalibrating people's palates to understanding what Carmenere as a grape should be. So a lot of educational, either guilds or institutions or study groups have replaced their Carmenere bottles either in blind tastings or just in study sessions with Casa Silva, so they can now understand.
Yep, they used it in my W set.
Yeah, exactly. Amazing. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I mean, yeah, totally. So there's all that history and kind of all that nerdiness and all that awesomeness that goes behind this grape and behind this winery. But at the end of the day, what I love about Carmenere is that consumers and wine lovers love this wine. When you get it in their mouths and they're able to try it, it's honestly, the flavor profile of Carmenere is as if Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon had a baby. Why is that? It's because Malbec, the elements of Malbec that it takes is beautiful dark fruit, a little bit of a softer tannin, and then from Cabernet Sauvignon, it gets a lot of that spiciness, pepperiness that you can get from a cab without too much of a big tannin structure or too much concentration. So it's a brilliant kind of hybrid wine that fits so many consumers' palates, and they end up loving it and really gravitating to it. And the cuvee that we're tasting is a blend of two vineyard sites, which is the Los Linges area to the east, and then there's an area called Lolo, which is a little bit more towards the coast. So beautiful, cool climate areas that come together. For $15 retail, truly pound for pound, you are not going to find a better quality to price point Carmenere in the market. So who doesn't love a great $15 bottle of wine? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Totally. And what are you doing after you drink or before you drink in Colchagua?
Yeah, so our Carmenere crash course, yes. So we start out, so we live the day from vine to bottle, which I love. So we start out in the Los Linges area. So we can literally see the dirt, the soil, the roots of Carmenere and what makes this terroir so unique and so specific to growing great Carmenere. It's the hugest soil cutout you'll ever see. It's kind of like a wall of roots, and you can see all of the cross-section of soil there. Then we'll head to the winery. Another really awesome element of the culture of Colchagua as a valley is that it's very focused around horses. So from just having horses, or the sport of rodeo is a very traditional sport in the country of Chile. So there's an actual rodeo mini kind of stadium within the winery area. So we get to see a demonstration of rodeo happen. And there's a specific type of Chilean horse that does the rodeo. So it's very cool to see that sport kind of go and be performed. And you enter it, it's in this like literally magical eucalyptus forest is where you enter this little stadium area.
Oh, wow.
And if you ever need to heal yourself, enter a eucalyptus forest, feel its like cool, shadowy air, and take a big whiff, a deep breath. And it's like, oh, like menthol, amazing freshness, and you're healed of all ailments, or maybe even a hangover. And that is that feeling of that specific region in Colchagua too, which is it's amazing. And then the Casa Silva family specifically has a very much a history with the sport of polo, another horse sport. So there's a polo field there. There's also a restaurant on the winery property that we eat lunch, and you can look out to the polo field, and there's a beautiful part of the coastal mountain range behind that field there, which is beautiful. And we have everything from tuna ceviche with one of the white wines that Casa Silva makes, the Sauvignon Gris. And then my favorite thing about the day with Casa Silva and the Carmenere Crash Course is that pairing Carmenere with like the classic Chilean sandwich. It's called a chacarero. Think of like the ultimate sandwich that you want to have, like when you want to dedicate yourself to a sandwich. They have homemade bread. It's sliced, like thinly sliced, sauteed in grilled meat. You have a tomato. You have a little bit of an offensive amount of homemade mayonnaise. So if you're a mayonnaise fan, it's pretty awesome. Avocado, which they call palta in Chile. And ironically, steamed green beans, which sounds so weird, but it's excellent. They're really thinly sliced. You can even go crazy and put a fried egg on top if you want to go wild. But like a big bite of that sandwich with French fries and Casa Silva Carmenere, like you're in a great place.
Life-changing. Oh.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And then the coolest part of the day is that we go to the winery, and Casa Silva has started to really do its research in Los Lingues and do micro vinifications of the different soil blocks within the area. So we barrel taste the 100% Carmeneres from the different soil blocks, and you see how different Carmenere can be based on where it's growing. Then we go to the tasting room, and we'll taste the all the different levels of Carmenere that they have, from single vineyards to micro terroir. And the micro terroir Carmenere is kind of their highest level 100% Carmenere from a blend of just select best blocks in the Los Lingues area. That wine is purposefully a late release vintage wine. So the current vintage for the US is 2012. So that usually is like the crescendo, brains are on the walls because they're just like mind blown of all the Carmenere experience they've had, that they're now tasting a vertical of Carmenere. So you're going all the way back to something like 2008 or 2009. And people are seeing A, that Carmenere can taste good, B, well-made Carmenere is outstanding, and C, well-made Carmenere can age beautifully. And that truly is like, whoa. And talk about slippery slopes. Essentially, when you taste good Carmenere with people in the US, they'll taste the cuvee and be like, wow, that's awesome. And then you taste them on the Los Lingues single vineyard, which is even more elegant and beautiful. And they're like, whoa, that's so cool. And all they want to do is keep going. They want to keep seeing what Carmenere can do in next tiers. And that's the Carmenere Crash Course has that effect on everyone. So it's very cool to live that in Chile, but also deliver that in the US just through the bottles too. So Montana, you know this, like it's the best when you get to represent really tasty wines. That makes our job very easily.
Sure does help.
Sure does help. Yeah. So we all go to bed in a very much a Carmenere coma, but with very happy bellies and happy minds and palates. And also the Casa Silva family is so hospitable. There's also a hotel there where you can stay at. So it's this beautiful old ranch that we can have dinner at and stay at. And it's lovely. The hospitality of South America is just absurdly amazing. You leave there like with your heart completely open and just wanting to give back to all these amazing people. So that's our very compacted mini Chile experience. How did it go, Montana? How was it?
It's so good. I'm like dying, but I'm loving it because honestly, like we talked about, wine really is that way of traveling in this time. And I feel like I got a taste of it. Like you start to smell the ocean or really like hear the horse hooves. It's so cool. And it, feeds my wanderlust a little bit for the time being. But I mean, I can't wait to actually see that. You painted a beautiful picture. Very well done.
I love it. And you know, it's so funny. So I've lived in Chile and I live in California right now. And there's such similarities. They're such kindred souls from how the landscape's oriented and just how the wine regions are. The coastal areas looks very similar in different places. And the thing that makes me laugh so much is that if anyone's driven in California, Highway 5 is kind of the artery that goes north and south in California. Literally, when we're driving in Chile, we are driving Highway 5 going north and south. It's the exact same highway. Like it's
awesome.
stupid. The parallels are stupid. So if anyone's had a wanderlust dream of doing a road trip in California, you literally are doing the exact same dream just south of the equator. So we would end our time in Chile, and then we drive back to Santiago, have one more fun night in the city, and then the next day we get on a plane and again take that flight from Santiago to Mendoza. So again, it's only 45 minutes. You're going into a new country, but the entire flight is over the Andes mountain range. So you first see the magnitude of the width of this mountain range, and you see all the different topography the mountains have as you go from the Piedmont in Chile, going up to the high elevations in the middle, and then sloping down to what is the valley in the area of Mendoza. It's also fascinating to see the change of landscape with a water element of like what is green where and what is really arid. And so when you get to that dry desert Mendoza side, it very much changes with what you can see from the Chilean side. So we'd land in Mendoza, we'd go through customs because we're in a new country. And then we get in a van and we go to Mendoza, the downtown area. So this is usually a great kind of hub for people to stay in when they visit areas within Mendoza, within Luján de Cuyo and the Uco Valley. There's a lot of different ways to kind of skin the cat of how you can visit Mendoza. You can spend some time in the city, visit the Luján de Cuyo wineries and regions. Then, the Uco Valley is about, generally depends on where you're going in the Uco Valley, but about an hour and a half south of that. So you can either do day trips down there, or you can eventually just, pick a hotel within the Uco Valley and stay within that region. So
Sure.
Different ways to do it. So for the two wines from Argentina, what a delight. We have Bodini Rosé and we have La Posta Pizzella Malbec. First thing that's so fun about both of these wines, they're both made with Malbec. Of course, we're going to talk about Malbec if we're going to talk about Argentina, but we have two very different personalities of Malbec. And what I love about Bodini Rosé is that 9 times out of 10, people have never tried a rosé of Malbec. So it's a really fun new experience you can deliver to people who know Malbec, but not in this style. And then La Posta Pizzella Malbec, we're going to talk in full about it when we taste it, but if you're going to deliver someone a bottle who you're like, I want to bring someone a bottle that is such a pure, excellent representation of the tastiness and greatness of Malbec, bring them La Posta Pizzella. They will be so happy. And on top of that, the packaging is beautiful. The story is amazing. You've got Laura Catena with her innovations with this story. So it's great. And the winemaker for Bodini Rosé is Jimena Lopez. So we've got two amazing female forces coming through with these wines, which is just great. And again, this is only a toe dip in our book, in our world from Argentina. So again, we have many more trips to take. So Bodini Rosé is a wine that is based in Luján de Cuyo. So we're going to start in that northern, a little bit farther eastern region. And this is an area that, again, is more classic and traditional with the kind of older bonded wineries in the area. It's generally lower elevation than the Uco Valley. And the winemaker is Jimena Lopez, and she makes Bodini, and she also makes a wine called Graffito, which we can talk about at another time. It's her own personal label. And honestly, I know few winemakers who are as talented, precise, and elegant, and just so focused with their winemaking than Jimena Lopez. And that's for male or female.
And that's just how she is. That's like the air she presents.
Exactly.
I've met her at least twice, maybe 3 times. She's come to Colorado, and I'm always just like, she's a spectacular lady.
You're around her and you're like, you want all your buttons buttoned, not in a stressful way. It's just like,
no, you just want to like,
she's such an example for people, and I think such a role model. But she's one of those people that inspires from within. She just is being her authentic self, and that is alone is inspiring. And has the heart of gold, where we will go down to Argentina and she'll invite us into her home. She'll have her family with us. She has her husband and her 2 beautiful daughters. We'll make empanadas with her mom. Like, come on, this is just like crazy sauce.
Real deal.
She is such an authentic spirit to tell the right stories of Argentina and tell the stories of what Argentina can do as a winemaking country. And this is from a woman who, you look at her and she looks like she's 25, let alone has over 20 harvests under her belt for her lifetime and in over 6 different countries around the world. So she's had an unbelievable length of a career already and still has miles to go. And so you can see her elegance and her winemaking technique in her reds. She makes Malbec and Cabernet Franc. And the Bodini line has the Bodini Malbec. And the really cool element about Bodini Rosé, again, it's the unusual experience of Malbec being a rosé. And because Malbec is such, it's a dense red, she harvests the Malbec for Bodini Rosé at least 2 weeks earlier than the Malbec for Bodini. So 2 things that really helps is that it keeps a higher acidity in the wine when it's picked earlier. And it also is less of a sugar amount than the more ripe Malbec later on. So that helps with freshness of the rosé as well as alcohol level. So sure. Even though we know Malbec is a deeper wine, the rosé is still light and fresh in its feet, which is what we want in a rosé anyway. So she puts it in pneumatic press. The skin contact is mere minutes, just because, again, you just want a light touch of color. And what you get in the glass is this really cool, beautiful summer strawberry red fruit style of a rosé, but it has all these really cool elements, like a little bit of herbaceousness that's a great tone, nothing overwhelming. And there's even like this pepperiness that's there. And so we've been doing a lot of fun things on the Vine Connection side with pairing, with recipes. I have a coworker, Julie, who's a chef, and we recently did a live tasting and demo where she made a goat cheese, strawberry, and black pepper and basil tart. Come on.
Anytime Julie cooks, I like lose my mind, but then we bring the wines in because they're so like inspired, vice versa. It seems that it's like another amazing woman that just nails it.
Makes me so happy.
Yeah.
So it's a great rosé just to have in your ice bucket all summer or year long. But it gets this really cool culinary adaptability to it because it can play with so many different flavor profiles from sweet to savory. So just a beautiful wine. And again, this retails around $12. So it's like an all-day rosé that you can just screw off the screw cap and enjoy and have a grand old time. So, yeah, how is your world of rosé right now? I mean, there's so much rosé in the world. How have you worked with Bodini Rosé?
There's so much, but actually I find that, luckily it's starting to get more longevity throughout the year. So that's amazing. I think that people are starting to understand that if you're at a table with 4 people and everybody's going to eat something different, you can get a bottle of rosé, and it is a very versatile wine as a category. But also people are catching up a little bit with some of like the differences, and they're not that there's anything wrong with Provence because I love it. And it's a great wine to drink, but people always want to see something new and try something different. And when you have wines that Boyo Rosé is amazing too, and Bodini, that are just like so totally different, I always like to kind of show people side by side, like open both of them. You get kind of a taste of both and an experience of like comparison between the grape varieties, much warmer climate, cool climate, and both of them just work so well with food that you have to introduce someone to it, but once they try it, they love it. And so this kind of thing where we can kind of give people a preview of what to expect and then let them have the experience, it opens a lot of doors. And we do sell a significant amount of rosé because luckily, like I said, people are drinking it year round. It's not just a summer thing anymore. I love rosé at Thanksgiving, especially this wine.
Amen to that. That is such a cool seasonal turn of a wine, and that exact holiday application, it's awesome. Totally shines. So hoorah, Jimena. Always love supporting that woman. She's incredible. And so we transfer from the Luján de Cuyo region, Bodini Rosé. Now we're going to the heartland. We're going to 100% Malbec. We're going to the Uco Valley, and we're going to La Posta. So man, I mean, there's so much storytelling to pack in one bottle of wine. So La Posta is a Spanish word that means the tavern of the grape grower. And this is a project that was started by Laura Catena. And Laura Catena is a fourth generation vintner of the Catena family. She's the daughter of Nicholas Catena, who essentially is one of the key players who really brought Argentina to the world stage of premium winemaking in this last modern chapter, within the last 20 years. So incredibly influential family in the world of Argentine wine and the world. The irony is that Laura didn't want anything to do with wine in the start of her career. And so she went completely the opposite direction to a medical degree and has been an emergency room physician. She's taught medical classes at UCSF. She's also a mother of 3. She's authored multiple books. I mean, essentially how I describe Laura is that she's a woman who has 40 hours in her day. I don't know how she gets it all done, but she's also now started to work with her family winery. She really decided to start working in wine about 20 years ago. And she realized that, Argentina needs more of a team to really show the true story that's happening down there. So she still works with her family at the Catena Wines, but she's also done her own projects to tell specific stories of Argentine wine that she really wanted to champion and give a voice to. So La Posta is a really significant one because at this point, yes, that wineries can have their own estate fruit, so their own vineyards, but the foundation of winemaking that's still true today in Mendoza is that there's a lot of grower families that grow the grapes that sell to the wineries.
Sure.
And that's the livelihood, of course. And these older vineyards, generational vineyards, are making some of the best wines in Argentina. So, of course, you can't make good wine without good grapes. So she was sitting there being like, well, we need to tell the stories of these families. They're the reason why these grapes have been taken care of so well over these past generations. So she decided to make La Posta for 2 reasons. One, to really champion the stories of these families. So the name of the single vineyard Malbecs within the La Posta lineup are all named after the families that grow the grapes. So you've La Posta Pizzella, which we're trying today. We've La Posta Fazio and La Posta Paolucci. All of them sound incredibly Italian, right? But we're in Argentina. So it also speaks to the amazing Italian heritage and influence of the Italian culture in Argentina. So a lot of Italian immigration started in the 1800s coming over to Argentina, landing in Buenos Aires, the capital city to the east. Then a railroad was built between Buenos Aires and Mendoza, which is situated in the west up against the Andes Mountains. A lot of people started going towards the west to more of a country lifestyle. The Italians went over. They brought not only their thirst for wine in their daily life, but also all of that ancestral viticultural knowledge they gained from Italy. So they planted grapes, and these vineyards have been passed down generation to generation. So all to say that is why these names sound so Italian. They're Argentines in these generations, but they've kept the names of the families, of course.
Well, and it's so cool too for her own family legacy because it's such an incredible story and something so worth protecting. And she kind of like went on a different path, but always, there's that pride and desire to protect that story. And then to see it done so well, like you said, has to be really cool because it would be horrible to see that, having fall by the wayside or anything like that. So it's really cool. She came back to it.
Absolutely. It's so true. And her family lived the same lineage coming over from Italy and then evolving into the wine industry. So really authentic storytelling there, important storytelling for the preservation of that part of history. And so there's all of that great elements of La Posta. But another amazing ability you have with the La Posta single vineyard Malbecs is that overall, yes, when people think of Argentina and wine, they think of Malbec. That's all great. But I think that with the movement of Malbec in the US market, it kind of was introduced in the early 2000s. Everyone went crazy for the varietal. When anything gets very popular, whether it's grapes or shoes or clothing or anything, a lot of players get in the game and they try to make a lot of that same varietal, and it really dilutes the quality and the players that are making it right. It dilutes the whole category and kind of worsens the game for everyone. So I think many people think, Malbec has kind of had its heyday and what's next for Argentina, or, Malbec is boring, or whatever their comments are. My answer to that is, A, you wouldn't ask what's next after Cabernet in Napa or France in Bordeaux. why would Malbec be going anywhere in Argentina? They make the best Malbec in the world. They're going to continue to make Malbec into the future. And then secondly, when people say that to me about Malbec being tired, that's my cue to say that you probably haven't done a tasting of Malbec recently of really great producers, because I would say that Malbec is at its best quality it's been.
Well, and as you get into these sub-regions within Mendoza, then you really start to expand the understanding, because Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux is not the same as California, or even to be like a little more on track with the similarity here, it's like an area of California and then a completely different one. So you're like in Napa, or you're all the way down south in Ballard Canyon. It's totally different.
Yes. Amen. Amen. And so that exact theme of sub-regionality is a very new concept for people. I think people start by saying all wines from Argentina are X. That's like saying all wines in the United States are the same. That is like crazy talk. Then they say, all wines from Mendoza are the same. That's not true. That's exactly like saying a Pinot Noir from Sonoma is the same as the Santa Rita Hills. That's not true. So now when you're getting to subregions of Mendoza, it's just now the work is connecting the wines with the name places, so people can start to understand how wines connect to regions. So La Posta is a great a way to do that, and that's because each of the single vineyard Malbecs are made the exact same way. They're all 100% Malbecs. Only variable is where they're planted in Mendoza. And all of these three regions have different soil types, different age of vines, different elevations, and that really dictates the style of Malbec in the bottle. And I want
to open all of them and taste them all in a row, because that's how you get like the full. That's how all wine should be drunk. I think if someone's in like the learning phase, they're into like exploring and learning in a new way, that is the way to do it. Is open up multiple, even of the same variety, same whatever, and see it all how they relate. It's the only way to learn.
Amen. And I want to hear about your first experience doing the La Posta lineup in a row, because I think there's no cooler thing to witness or to experience yourself when you're like, okay, I'm going to taste Malbec, whatever. And you have 3 bottles in front of you and you start tasting Paolucci, Fazio, Pizzella. And then it's like, oh my gosh, they're all so different. Like, what was it like for you tasting, and how do you perceive each one of them?
Well, I really think about what, like, the first word that came to my mind was structure. And while they all have outstanding fruit and acidity, and all the components are really beautifully balanced wines, you definitely, I feel like for me, Pizzella is like more on the earthy side of the spectrum, if I'm remembering correctly. Paolucci for me is the more of a fruit forward. And then Fazio is going to be like, I think that's the one I would age a little bit longer, but we never can keep it in stock. Am I wrong? Yeah. Am I mixed up?
No, you're beautiful. You're perfect. It's almost like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's like what temperature and what style you're liking. And that's what I love when people taste all of them. They first have the aha that Malbec can be different based on where it's grown. The second is like, oh, I like this style of Malbec versus this style. You either have the spicier structure, more structure style of Fazio, or you have like the beautiful cloud of blackberry and mocha and a little bit of spice that you can get in Pizzella, which is like the love space that everyone wants to go to when they drink Malbec. Or you have kind of the more plum style of Paolucci, a little bit of softer tannin, and people love that. I mean, it's great. So it's not a yes or a no with the Malbec. It's this. Which one is your favorite?
Yeah.
So it's such great aha moments to deliver, structural sort of tasting you can have for an educational purpose, but also just a really fun tasting to do with friends, because it's like you get in tune with your palate and you start understanding where different flavors and structures hit on with different wines. So, and again, we're celebrating another amazing female force in the story of Argentine wine. I always, I'm so grateful. When I first started working in wine, I lived in Mendoza and I worked for the Catena family. So Laura has been a part of my wine story since the beginning. And she truly is someone who just, when she has an idea, and even if it can sound so forward thinking and visionary, she is on a determined track to make it happen. And that's why these sorts of changes have been able to happen in Argentina. They've seen it and they've pushed it forward to have it come to life. So she also makes the wines called Luca, which is kind of a next step up to even understanding Malbec, as well as high elevation Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, uh, Syrah from Argentina, which is outstanding, from cuttings from the Rhone. So yeah, we have a lot more tasting to do. But if we're gonna, dive into what our experience of Argentina would be like, I mean, truly, when I first started thinking about going to Argentina, I've lived in Buenos Aires, which was so cool. But then I started learning about this place called Mendoza, where they grow the grapes and make the wine, and how it's like, oh, there are vineyards and there are gauchos and there are mountains and grilled meat. I'm like, is this a fairyland that's like a real place? Like, I don't understand. I need to go to there. And so I arrived, and it was really one of the first places in the world that I landed and had this like very electric, energetic connection to, because the culture is so vibrant. The culture is vibrant, and then you have the drastic, beautiful backdrop of the Andes Mountains with vineyards and the slopes going towards the valley. It's just like, you can't make it up. So your days will be much, I mean, you can, if you're a hiker, you can find all of these different refugios and trails to hike within the Andes, and then come back to the valley, and then you can stay within the vines. And like, yes, when you think Argentina, you think grilled meats. The art of cooking over a fire, you will never find done this way anywhere else in the world. So the true art of the asado, and the cooking things that many people have learned through a chef like Francis Mallmann, it's all true. And it not only is an amazing culinary preparation, it's truly like an all day. You make your own charcoal, you forest from the desert to burn the fire, to then spread the charcoal under the cast iron parrilla or grill. The ingredients that go into an asado are meat, salt, and fire. That's it. So you then get to experience the quality of meat that Argentina produces. And the best part is that you start to see how generational and how valuable the art of the asado is. Because it's passed down, that just how to make an asado, but it's also an all-day ceremonial kind of gathering. So it's very much a place where families and friends gather, where you start at 10 in the morning, you're drinking Malbec the whole time, or any other wine from Argentina. You prepare the fire, and it's very just, it slowly evolves. And because different cuts of meat are done at different times and they cook very low and slow, you start with the sausages and the smaller cuts of meat, and then it evolves to the higher end cuts of meat and the bigger cuts of meat. And you, all of a sudden it's midnight and you're under the stars, and you're just like, this is the coolest. And then the Fernet comes out, and then you're like, oh God, we're going downhill fast.
Fernet and Coke. I remember that from Buenos Aires many years ago.
Yes, exactly. I have not drank so much Fernet in my flipping life than when I was in Argentina. But it becomes a very acquired, like, heart space taste that you're like, oh, Argentina.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's amazing. I just love the idea and the thought of it, and like the tastes and the flavors, and I can only imagine. So as soon as we can get down there, I keep saying that, but I know I'm just going to have this like in my head until it happens. So I love it. Meanwhile, we'll get to share it with everybody here through the wines and explore those flavors. Again, like I keep saying, it's like, you've got to open up the lineup, all four of these wines next to each other, pick and choose where you want to start and stop us, or just sit and taste with us the whole thing, because it's such an experience. You really do journey through these different climates and terroirs and people. There's amazing people behind these things, and these, powerful women that are amazing women in wine that are so inspirational. It's just a blessing, and yourself included. So thank you so much for the time and the journey.
Oh my gosh, you're so welcome. And thank you for taking the journey and joining us. Thank you for always being such a great voice for our winemakers, our wines, our countries. Like, truly, there are a few greater partners than Maverick, Colorado. So
we love about Vine Connections. You guys just kill it. The best.
And yeah, no, thank you guys for listening. That was a long journy. We made it through.
It's shorter than a week when you'd be there. So, break it up as needed.
True. So true. So I hope we can do more into the future and explore a few more corners and bottles within the country. So thank you, Montana. So much fun.
Thank you, Lizzy, and to the VC crew. You guys are amazing. And we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys. Ciao.
Ciao.